But LSU Tennessee is going to be one of the games in that early slate. And Jake, I've been thinking a lot about this game, how I feel on this game, and how maybe threatening LSU actually is to Tennessee. And I have compiled a list of things that make you feel very poorly about it. And then I've compiled some sunshine pumping ideas. First off, if you were to ask me which side of the equation I actually fall on, the negative or the positive, I would say negative. It's not that I don't think that LSU can win. Again, I just don't know that I can sit here and tell you to expect them to win. And I think the reasons for that are obvious, right? What if it does turn into a high-scoring affair, into a track meet? Is it possible for LSU to keep pace? And I don't want to be too much of a, I don't want to be too beholden to just recent results to form everything that I think of. I think it's a huge fallacy that I fall into, that many fall into when we talk about sports. But let me do that right now, Jake, because when I look at last game and I see a team that threw for 5 in the second half and allowed 337 to Robbie Ashford, it's really, really tough to feel good about that team beating Hendon Hooker and this Tennessee team. We talked about some of the coverage busts against Auburn. You do that against Tennessee, you're dead. Just look at the average yards per play on the season right now, Jake. Tennessee averages 7.3 yards per play. LSU averages 5.3. You're talking about on a per-play basis, a great single metric for overall efficiency. They are a full 2 yards better than you. And so, no, when I look at this, and a lot of people will point towards the defense, and I'm interested to get your take on the Tennessee defense, Jake, because certainly there do seem to be some red flags there. I still kind of feel like the defense is not as bad as maybe the surface level stats would make you think, though things like the Anthony Richardson box score are pretty damning on them. But yeah, I mean, the bottom line is that Tennessee just feels overwhelming for an LSU offense that has been underwhelming.
All right, so the stats you're talking about, Tennessee, they're actually 20th in the country against the run. They only give up 97.8 yards on the ground. But the thing that a lot of people are pointing to is they're 127th against the pass. Yeah. They give up 309.3 yards per game through the air. And so you look at that and you're like, well, I mean, does that matter? Because LSU had 5 passing yards in the second half against Auburn, okay? So that's where they're weak, but can you take advantage of it? Yeah. That's the story of the game. It's going to be what tells the story of the game. So you mentioned that they had a players-only meeting between the quarterbacks and the receivers. Like, they realize what it is, and it's not good. They have to get on the same page. This Tennessee team, I kind of agree with you. Like, the stats maybe don't line up with some of the film that you've watched. Yes, they've given up yards in bunches, and Anthony Richardson definitely had his day against Tennessee when he had not done that against anyone else through the air. So there's plays to be made. I don't think it's as bad as the numbers say. I think there's opportunities for sure, but the question is, again, can LSU take advantage of what Tennessee's been giving up through the air, because they are very stingy on the ground.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, okay, so questions about how much, what percentage of this thing is responsible for this result? Like, those are always kind of impossible questions to answer. I do think that a lot of Tennessee's defensive stats, you got to understand. Of course, they're going to give up higher volume numbers in a lot of ways, Jake, because they don't care about the clock. Like, they're dead last in the SEC. They only possess the ball 26 minutes a game. They do not care about it in the slightest. They have no problem putting their defense back on the field. They know that their defense will get more wins over your offense than the opposite, right? And that has borne out to be true thus far. But with that style, it's a style that's not going to translate greatly just to a pure statistical outlook. And then you also look at the fact that a lot of times Tennessee is getting ahead. Teams are having to play from behind. So, and look, I know the carries aren't that different from regular SEC teams, so it's not drastic, but it is somewhat influencing the situation where teams are not able to run the ball as much. They're having to throw it a bit more. Still holding teams under 3 yards a carry, though, so the run defense still remains very good. So, yeah, they're like, just be careful of, like, I don't think Tennessee's pass defense is Arkansas's pass defense. Arkansas's pass defense is legitimately awful. They do get nice pressure on the quarterback, but that secondary, man, some of the angles. Go look at the first Alabama touchdown to Prentice last weekend and look at the angle that the safety Slusher takes. It is one of the worst defensive plays I have ever seen. I don't think Tennessee is in
I was talking about that unit last night. Think about Arkansas. Like, so Catalan's out. He's like all-American type guy.
Yeah.
2 starters from last year are now 2 starters in purple and gold, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you just saw one of your guys in Greg Brooks. He just, made a play to end the game for LSU.
Wofford had a pick too, actually. Kind of lost it.
Fouché was somebody that's, starting for LSU now. So they've had a lot of turnover in that room there at Arkansas, and some of the scheme is to blame as well, which is crazy because Barry Odom has always kind of been the guy that you're like, man, he came up with the Mike Leach beater, and so we'll see if he can do it again this weekend. But I kind of agree with you. Arkansas's pass defense is hot garbage right now, but Tennessee technically is giving up more yards per game through the air.
But do you think they're worse?
I think the scheme at Arkansas, I got some question marks about that, and you just had so much loss and turnover that group doesn't feel like they're on the same page. It's not like it's strides better by any means, though.
Also, Arkansas had Arkansas would be in last had they not got the steroid injection that is playing Texas A&M.
That's fair.
If you need to cut down the yards that you are giving up per game to the air, play Texas A&M. Literally, Arkansas went from 359 per game to 300 per game after one game against Jimbo and the Aggies.
If we want to pump some sunshine into this matchup,
okay, I got 3 sunshine points. Let's do it.
Okay, I think that when you look at the style of quarterback that Anthony Richardson is, right, they struggled with that. He threw for 453 yards. He threw his only touchdowns of the year at that point in that game. They struggled with keeping him in the pocket and not allowing him to make plays on the run. If you go back and you watch that tape, he was really good. Not saying he escaped the pocket or bailed too soon, but they did not scramble drill or whatever it was. They did not handle that situation well. Now, they've had a bye week, and they are going to obviously try to clean that up. But that style of quarterback, way more than Keaton Slovis and Pitt. I mean, Keaton Slovis and Pitt, we were kind of joking. I didn't know if he was going to make it out alive.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a statue back there. He was making the passes, but he was getting tattooed after he let the ball go. And credit to him for staying in the pocket. He actually had a pretty decent day before he went out with injury. But I think Tennessee struggles more against a quarterback that can, make a throw and a run, can get out of the pocket and do some of the things that Anthony Richardson did compared to Keaton Slovis.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back to the Tennessee-Florida game flow. How inflated, and maybe this is not fair because Florida somehow still ended up with that Hail Mary opportunity thanks to the onside kick, but how inflated are the numbers after Tennessee went up 17, right? Because it felt like at that point they were still well, I mean, look, in the context.
I mean, look at the scoring charts by quarters. Tennessee scored 3, Florida scored nothing in the first quarter. In the second quarter, 14-14. In the third, 7-14. In the fourth, 12-7. There was never this lopsided.
Okay.
Did they get up 17? Yes, they did. But, I mean, LSU just got down 17 and won at Auburn. They got down 13 and won against Mississippi State. So, like, in college football, sometimes in pro football, I think you're exactly right. But in college football, sometimes that doesn't really necessarily mean anything. You're still playing the same defenses.
Yeah, I think well, I guess we're going to find out. And look, LSU has been at their best, and Jaden Daniels has when things look worse. So maybe that's actually kind of favorable if they were to end up in that. Okay, if I was going to point towards things that I could sunshine pump over, first and foremost would be unlike this last game where Madhouse got outflanked pregame, did an excellent job of making adjustments, right? But they've been very upfront about it. They, like Auburn came out, did stuff they were not expecting them to do. That cost LSU early on. Can Madhouse flip that script? Can he put a game plan together to stop Hooker and Heupel like he did for Leach and Rodgers? And let's focus back in on Leach and Rodgers real quick because nobody else has been able to do what they were able to do as Here is the Will Rogers game log on the season thus far. Against Memphis, 77% completion, 450 yards, 5 touchdowns. Against Arizona, 81%, 313 yards, 4 touchdowns. Against Bowling Green, 78%, 409 yards, 6 touchdowns. Against Texas A&M, 69%, 329, 3 touchdowns. Against LSU, 57%, 214 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. So you are talking about significantly less, at least a third of the touchdowns of any other game, 1 to 200 yards less. The only game in which he's sub 60 completion percentage. He's only been sub 70 one other game this entire season. So that was a performance that is an outlier and one that you would have never expected going into that game, and yet they made it happen. You're going to need a similar outlier performance on Hooker and Heupel.
When you look at the game plan of what Matt House has put out there, even if it hasn't worked, I think they've done a really nice job of adjusting. In the Florida State game in the second half, certainly in the Auburn game, you came out with a plan to try to stop Ashford with his legs, and look, he came out there and he threw for over 300 yards, as T-Bob found out yesterday during the show. So, he's come up with great game plans, but I think it's been more about the adjustment at halftime as well and what they've been able to do. But here's the thing. Against a team like Tennessee, are you going to have the ability to wait until you adjust, right? Because of what they can do and how fast they can do it, and they can score a lot of points. So the game plan that they come up with, you still feel confident in it because of what he's been able to do. I mean, New Mexico, 80-something yards. I mean, they had 80 yards total in the game and 2 first downs. And I realized the next opponent, but they played UNLV. They had that many yards in the first 2 drives.
Yeah, no, look. New Mexico was a perfect defensive game. It's just that you're never going to get it is a positive piece of evidence. It's just you're not going to build an entire take house on it. House.
No, but it's part of what we're talking about here. If you put that in there.
Yeah. I mean, I guess. But what weighs more heavily in your mind? The Auburn offensive success or the New Mexico dominance?
I mean, it's you don't have to compare them. I mean, it's just part of the story. In the second half, you made adjustments and Auburn didn't do anything offensively.
Yeah.
So you got tricked. They fooled you, right? You tip your cap to them, and you come back and you make the adjustments, and they did. I mean, when Flynn gets here, we're going to break down a play of coverage and the one that they hit their first touchdown on, and you're going to be able to see what the game plan was in that game, and they're not going to have that game plan, I don't think, for the rest of their schedule. Because even the quarterbacks that they're going to face that are mobile quarterbacks can make better throws than Ashford can. You're not going to have that same game plan against Anthony Richardson because he can flick his wrist and he can throw it 60 yards and they're going to beat you over the top. So that game plan was just for that team, and it wasn't working, and they scrapped it, they adjusted, and you saw a different team in the second half. If you're going to be a team, which is fine, but if you're going to throw intermediate routes, that's going to be who you are, then you'd like to see this week the scheme have those playmakers in those areas.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If that's what you're going to be, which, again, you can win games doing that. And if you want to take shots, you can take shots, and you've got receivers to do that. But if you're going to give your quarterback quick and easy throws, do that with 7 and 11 and 80 and, some of and 8 and some of those guys. And Jure, do it with those guys. And you could still feature the tight end. This isn't a tight end slander. This is just if you're going to have that many targets for your tight end, that's what you want to be. Put your playmakers in those spots.
Yeah. And I guess maybe that's a bit what the meeting was about. Okay, before we get to players only meeting, a couple more sunshine pumping points here. So we mentioned one, and that would be Matt House, right? When he's been elite every game in terms of adjustments, and when LSU has also come out with a good base plan, they have been an elite defense. The next kind of sunshine pumping point here, we kind of touched on this, so we don't need to spend more time on it, Jake, but maybe Jaden Daniels clicks in the same way that Anthony Richardson did. The same way we just looked at Rogers' game log. If you look at Richardson's, it was bad, incredible. He threw for 30 more yards against Tennessee than he did the previous 3 games combined. Here is probably the strongest sunshine pumping point, though, Jake. And it's one that maybe kind of makes you cock an eyebrow a little bit. And that's the line, right? That's the line. Like Vegas knows. What did this thing open up at? Did anybody see where it opened at? I want to say 4.5, 4.
I think 4.5 that's the earliest I saw.
Okay, so 4.5, which already, again, in the context of a team that just threw for 5 in the second half and allowed 337 to Robbie Ashford, that feels small, right? You're like, that's just a general. That's a bit odd. Tennessee's been really good this year. And then for that immediately money to come flowing in on LSU, and that get pushed all the way down to 3, I mean, that right there shows you, okay, maybe, this, do not, and that's why I talked about recency bias with the Auburn game. Like, do not build your entire take house based off of that Auburn game because that may be flawed in its construction. And so when you see 3, you know it's going to be a dogfight. I'm not saying you're going to win the game, but that's a game that, a play here or there ends up making the entire difference. It's why, unless you feel really good about it, sometimes I get more freaked out by betting on small spread games than the big ones just because it's going to come down to maybe who has the ball last or whatever crazy ball bounces there at the end.
Isn't it funny? Isn't it?
Footy.
So the talk that we had at SEC Media Day was who's the third best team? And there was also a narrative that I don't really know what LSU is going to be. Could be good, could be bad, but I know what they have, which is talent, which can really beat any team in the SEC if they bring their A game. Mm-hmm. And it still feels like we're in that same conversation. Like, who's the third best team in the SEC? Don't really know. And then it's still like, you know what? LSU's got some dudes. Like, I know it hasn't looked perfect, but they've got the talent to be able to be in there and be in any game. And so it's kind of the same conversation that we had way back in July.
Well, and I think the up and down nature of this team right now is always a hallmark of a young team, of a new team. And that's what you have. I mean, you have a lot of youth on the field right now, but you also have a lot of new, even with your upperclassmen, right? And I always think it's a very volatile mix that can come with kind of peaks and valleys, and you're experiencing that. Now, because you have fight and grit, as Jake would champion, because you have these things, that's why your record's what it is.
They have grit on the wall, by the way, over there. Found that out.
I mean, there you go. Woo. That's how you're 2-0 in the SEC right now. That's how you almost managed to come back in that game number 1 in which you were awful. But it's like, make no mistake, to win games like this, Jake, they're going to have to be on a peak day. Like, you're not going to be able to do what you did against Auburn, against Florida State. If you dig that hole, there is no chance of climbing out of the pit against Tennessee.
Yeah, Mississippi State, game plan, even execution, that can beat Tennessee.
Yeah. Even then, that 13-0, his first quarter was a little sketchy, but outside of that, it was great.
Okay, that's going to happen. Games have flows, and that's going to happen. And 13-0 in college football, that's no longer. They used to be like when you were playing, maybe not as much when you were playing, but when I was playing 13-0, like you were getting dominated. Now it's like 13-0. Let me score before half. I'm going to get the ball. Okay, it's 14-13 us now.
Yeah.
So like that performance, that can go win you this game, because make no mistake about it, like Mississippi State, you just saw what they did to Texas A&M.
Yeah.
It's a damn good win.
A good team.
I mean, it's a really good win that you have under your belt now. So you know it's in there. This team in Tennessee, when you look at what they can do offensively, like that's going to be their strength, right? And what is your strength? Well, it's your defense, and it's your game planning, and it's your adjustments on the defense side of the football. So as far as that gives you a good feel about this game. Now, here's the thing. What Tennessee doesn't do well on defense, well, you don't do well on offense.
Yeah.
Can you do it well enough in this game to make a difference? It's the story. It's going to be the entire game. Can LSU, through the air, make enough of a difference to score enough points to win this game?